Would you like to visit a strange, incomprehensible, and unfamiliar world? One that has only recently made contact with civilization? Meet primitive cannibals? Be shocked by outrageous prices in a country where a $500 monthly salary is considered a fortune. Then, Papua New Guinea is your destination. Port Moresby, the capital. The airport resembles many others around the world. Even the customs officers, meticulously and deliberately rummaging through a passenger's luggage to signal that a bribe is needed, are reminiscent of some African countries. They tell him, "Oh no, sir, you can't bring new items into the country." He asks where it's written, and the customs officer, pretending not to hear, slowly continues rifling through the bags. "This is not Australia, little white guy. You'll wait." Here's the parking lot in front of the airport. The taxi is at least 30 years old. Its interior has never seen a deep cleaning, but the driver is a friendly, smiling fellow who entertains his passengers with stories of life in New Guinea in English. But they can barely understand him, as English has degenerated into the Creole language talk pigeon. In Port Moresby stands the monumental-looking Congress Center. The government of New Guinea invited heads of state from APEC member countries for a summit, likely hoping this event would spur investment in the economy. But the guests left. No money came, and the building, constructed by the Chinese from cheap materials, is slowly falling apart. And they still owe China a lot of money for it. Money they simply don't have. Oh, and the government also bought 40 Maseratis for summit guests to impress them with grandeur. Now, they sit in an open parking lot behind the center, covered in thick layers of dust. Unlike the Land Cruisers purchased at the same time, they weren't stolen by greedy government officials simply because there's nowhere to drive them. There are hardly any decent roads. If you're looking to get an adrenaline rush and perhaps part ways with your wallet, phone, or even your health, you can try wandering through the crime-ridden neighborhoods. Unlike many cities around the world, where locals theatrically warn you of supposed dangers, here it's genuinely dangerous. On the littered asphalt, stained red from the beetle nut chewed by nearly everyone here, groups of young people squat. Their stares promise nothing good. There are many young men from villages, sometimes distant ones, who come to the city to find work, but there isn't any. So they turn to car theft, mugging pedestrians. The police hardly intervene. Here, the law is the rascal gangs. Some rise to become the elite of the criminal underworld, hitmen, armed robbers, or even mercenaries in the tribal wars of the Papua New Guineans. And they drink alcohol, a lot of it. Cheap local beer and homemade whiskey, a foul concoction. Once drunk, they show off their bravado. Like a member of the Scar Devils gang who shot a regular worker at a gas station simply because he didn't give up his spot in line to refuel. Among the impoverished residents of the slums, they are seen almost like Robin Hoods, occasionally buying a pig for a feast or a few sacks of rice for their neighbors. Visiting a primitive Papua tribe will also be an interesting experience. Isn't it fascinating to see how your ancestors lived 20,000 years ago? None of your office worker or system administrator friends has seen anything like this. Along the way, the guide, probably to pique the interest of the few tourists on the bus, will tell what he considers an amusing story about how cannibals working for a local politician ate 7 people in a village, scaring the population from voting for the politician's opponent. He will also, with a serious expression, warn tourists that ritual cannibalism is still practiced among the mountain tribes of Papua. And in the city, you might hear a ragged beggar with a fierce face exclaim, "Damn white sorcerer." And primitive societies don't mess around with sorcerers. They must be killed, roasted, and made into delicious steaks as quickly as possible. An exaggeration, of course, but not by much. Those visiting the Papua tribes should bring gifts for their future primitive friends: coffee, Coca-Cola, a celebratory drink here, a can of slaked lime for chewing betel nut, which gives a light narcotic effect, and cigarettes. They say cannibals are particularly pleased to receive live pigs as gifts, but perhaps next time. At the settlement, initially, nothing about the respected primitive warriors will seem particularly interesting. Silent women dancing in traditional attire, just loincloths, marked with strange body paint. Then they'll offer you the chance to buy a ritual mask. Damn, why are they so expensive here? They'll show you the men's house, the women's house, long, primitive barns. But then, the tribal leader invites the guests into his large, by Papua standards, luxurious hut. The chief, a short, wiry man in his middle years, with a strong lower jaw and a sharp look in his deeply set, intelligent eyes, proudly shows off his collection of empty whiskey bottles. But here's the main event of the visit, the demonstration of his enemy skull collection. This is the highlight, because the instinct for violence embedded in us by nature, which you, as a civilized person, have buried under the thin veneer of Christ's commandments and upbringing, mistakenly thinking you've overcome it, still exists and demands spectacle. And so, the chief leads the tourists to the forbidden hut, proudly raising his head to show off the wall adorned with numerous, carefully scraped human skulls. The grinning skulls, the guide will explain, were collected before the 1940s. Now, such crimes are strictly investigated by the police. But many of the skulls look far too recent to be 80 years old, and the chief, gazing at the tourists from under his brow, looks at them like prey, though he tries to smile hospitably. But now, the gifts have been handed over to the chief, and the tour company, ensuring the group's safety, passes a fat envelope of cash to him through the guide. The tribe waves goodbye. In reality, brutal wars are still being fought in the mountains and jungles. Hundreds of Papuans die each year from the flint spearhead or obsidian knife that slits a poor fellow's throat. Raids on villages when only women, children, and the elderly remain are common, at least for now. Kidnapping women and children for slavery, killing those who resist, false retreats to lure attackers into ambushes and slaughter all the enemy warriors. It's all still here, just as Neanderthals practiced in Europe until the Cro-Magnons drove them out. The official authorities of Papua New Guinea, of course, deny this, but it's true. Before your departure, you can take one last evening stroll along Port Moresby's waterfront, where the crumbling infrastructure consists of concrete walkways, giant trash bins, and broken benches. After everything you've seen and heard in this country, one conclusion naturally suggests itself. The greedy, corrupt officials, who have grown fond of the comforts of civilization, want everything and in abundance. The ordinary people want much less: a bowl of rice with pork, a pack of cigarettes, the ability to charge their old phone, and a couple of liters of gas for their Chinese scooter. And the Papuans from the Stone Age need almost nothing from the outside world. Just cigarettes, Coca-Cola, maybe whiskey, and for civilization to stay out of their lives, letting them continue living as they have for thousands of years in their brutal, familiar world. As for Port Moresby, it's certainly a terrible place, but it doesn't quite match the horrors of, say, Dhaka or Kabul.